Hello, and welcome to the Green Team of the Legendarium, the weird little spinoff where patrons of the Legendarium talk about the books and topics the main crew hasn't gotten around to yet. I'm Little Red Book. Tonight I have with me the unusually grumpy Chesky
Hello.
and the surprisingly content Seeker42.
Hello.
Megan couldn't join us tonight, but she will be back for our third volume. We'll be discussing volume 2 of Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. That would be chapters 23 through 44. As we get started, Here Finn asked, share bits of characterization, world building, and style that you enjoy.
All right.
Chesky.
Well, did we want to do a summary first of the chapters so we can explain our characterization or anything? Or
Maybe we should do that first. What do you think, Seeker?
Sounds good.
Yep.
Okay, you're on. Seeker, you're on.
Oh, me?
Yeah, I thought you were doing the summary.
I did write one. I didn't know I was going to be reading it.
You are.
Okay. Okay. Mr. Honeyfoot and Mr. Segundus meet Jonathan Strange at the Shadow House and complain about Mr. Norrell buying up all the magical books. Mr. Strange is persuaded to seek out Mr. Norrell. Mr. Norrell accepts Jonathan Strange as a pupil after insulting him. While teaching Jonathan Strange, the two sides of Mr. Norrell's nature do battle. Stephen gets showered with gifts. Arabella Strange meets Lady Pole. Jonathan Strange is a self-absorbed donkey. In a move reminiscent of King David, Mr. Norrell gets Jonathan Strange sent to war so he can get his hands on some attractive books. Arabella Strange
I like that. That was really good. Okay, sorry.
That's okay. Arabella Strange desperately tries to make her husband happy by getting him a gift. Strange makes roads for Sir Arthur Wellesley. Meanwhile, back in England, the search for the Raven King books continues, and the man with the thistledown hair has decided to make Stephen King of England. Mr. Strange rearranges the landscape and talks to zombies, then returns home a hero after the defeat of Napoleon. Upon his return to England, Jonathan Strange is asked to try to cure the madness of King George. He is unsuccessful, but does prevent the king from being kidnapped by the man with the thistledown hair. Strange doesn't tell Norrell.
Story of the book.
Yeah. A rift forms between Strange and Norrell. Strange continues to ignore his wife even as she tries to relay helpful information. Strange enters the Looking Glass and travels the paths of magic to uncover the perfidy of Mr. Drawlight, who has been selling access to magic without the magician's knowledge, but then must walk home. In an attempt to punish Drawlight, Mr. Norrell tries to revive the magical court of the Cinque Dragons, with himself as its head, naturally. But Mr. Drawlight soon pays for his deceptions in debtor's prison. After Mr. Norrell criticizes Jonathan Strange for mirror walking, Jonathan Strange publicly criticizes Mr. Norrell's whole approach to magic and the Raven King. Jonathan Strange breaks with Mr. Norrell and leaves London. Arabella Strange continues to be an afterthought to her husband. Jonathan Strange helps win Waterloo and learns an important lesson about trying to see the future. Mr. Segundus tries to open a school for magic and is impeded by Mr. Norrell. Jonathan Strange does not reply to a plea for help. Mr. Norrell is unhappy that Jonathan Strange has been writing a book. Meanwhile, the man with the thistledown hair plots boggy magical mischief. Arabella Strange dies and leaves behind a mysterious puddle of black water. And that's it.
Pretty much.
It's as good a recollection as any.
I love, as far as stylistically, how they there's basically three stories going on in this section. There's a story of Stephen and the thistledown-haired man. There's the story of Arabella forming a friendship with
Lady Pole.
Thank you. And there's Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell's rivalry. But they interconnect pretty well.
And for reasons I don't understand, maybe will be pertinent in part 4, there's the whole Mr. Secundus plot line that just seems to be there.
Let me get this onto Hearing fans' questions a little bit. Bits of characterizations, world building, and style that I enjoy. I think I would have enjoyed this more if her editor had cut down like half to 3/4 of this whole book so far. It's just so much. So much. The little bit with Mr. Secundus that doesn't, unless, like you say, Seeker, there's something coming, that chapter does nothing for us. Not, at least not for me. Maybe it does for a lot of other people who really like
well,
it.
not yet. I mean, I'm hoping that it like has something to do with something in part 3, because otherwise, what's he there for? Because he's been there since the beginning.
But he doesn't need to be anymore. He's had his part. I mean, if something happens, then we'll see. But I wouldn't mind if every chapter was cut in half and she had to clean up half of the descriptions about people that we'll never see or don't need to really know about. I just feel like she way over describes everything to me. Not in a purpley prose kind of a way, but in a, this is the guy who had a bucket and he got the bucket from his neighbor, and the neighbor used to use the bucket for taking milk in from the shed, but now he doesn't use it anymore because he gave it back to this guy. And it's like, I don't need the history of this bucket that I'm going to see for 10 seconds, or this man, or this tree, or this farm, or like the Wilsers who keep the king in the mental asylum. Like, it's very cool. It's very nice that she wrote it all, but I'm like, just cut like 3/4 of it. I don't care about the Wilsers and why they have an insane asylum, or who. Yeah, I like some of her characterizations of Mr. Strange and Mr. Norrell, though, especially Mr. Norrell, because in the first book half, he was very. It felt like he was very like, I'm just against magic except for me. But then he meets Mr. Norrell or Mr. Strange, and he's like, oh my gosh, I have someone to talk to, and it's like so much better with somebody else than just by myself. And he's still not enough to just be like, I can give you all my books and you can have full access, because that's just not who he is. You know, he likes to keep them pristine and clean, and, you know, worries about, he's like a paranoid guy. You know, he's paranoid about
he's a miser.
Yeah. And that's just who he is, though. He doesn't do it to be like mean per se. I don't think it's just kind of like in his mind, that's what you do with his books, right? You know, they keeps him safe.
I think he wants to be in the history books, and he's paranoid that someone else will steal his spotlight. That's the impression I'm getting.
Going back to Strange and Norrell's and their relationship, I like the contrast between their characters. By the way, it's hilarious when Jonathan Strange is like, I'm going to borrow 40 books to go to war.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and he played him such a way where he's like, oh, you can't say no with the general here. And so Mr. Norrell's like, oh crap, I have to, like, you have to be protected. You have to, yeah. So I like that.
An
too.
iron box.
Yeah.
Put them in the library. He's like, I can't use them if, you know, they're in a library. I'm going to be with the army. At the very beginning, when Mr. Norrell takes on Strange as
Pupil.
a student, he writes this list, very precise list.
Mm-hmm.
And Jonathan Strange's list that he asks for the books is, there's ink blots and there's
it's scratched out all over the place. It's written
out,
in the
and then
margins.
there's like
Yeah, and he started composing a poem to his wife on the same paper.
Exactly. And I just thought that was such a neat way to contrast their characters.
One is OCD and the other's ADHD.
Yeah, I like that. That's kind of funny. I always think of him as Mr. Norrell's like book smart. He just he loves reading and learning, and he's very theoretical, except he is practical as well, right? And Mr. Strange is the opposite. He's like, I'm just going to dig in hands first and get, figure it out as I go, and kind of. Does that make sense? What I'm saying?
Oh, yes,
yeah, but they work together, so yeah.
His very first spell, he's like, I'm not even sure how I did it. He's like, I heard the music in my head or something like that when he put the book into the mirror.
Oh, that it just felt right or something like that.
Yeah. And I would like to say I enjoyed the first half of Volume 2 1,000% more than all of Volume 1. So if you could reduce Volume 1 to like 3 chapters instead of like 20, And then that's perfect for this book. And then you move right into number 2. And then about the end of volume 2, you need to cut off about 7 chapters
What would
somewhere.
you cut?
I don't know. I kind of liked the
I don't know.
description of getting the bogwood.
I love that part.
See,
It was hilarious.
funny where he's just like, okay, we're going to have to sit here for 9 hours. And then the Thistledown man just stops talking. And Mr. Black's like, okay, guess we're going to sit here. I don't know. I am so tired of the Thistledown man and his story. I just don't enjoy him as much. Like I kind of did in this one because he's actually doing stuff versus the first one where it's all chance and misdirection, and this one's like he's actively working. But I don't know what I would cut. I think if you just cut half the descriptions, like I said earlier, it would shrink itself down to a better size. But
Okay, so this is what I will say. The footnotes are pretty. I mean, in this section, there's like whole footnotes that are entire fairy tales.
yeah,
Um,
that was
So what I will say is the footnotes, you don't need to read them. So just stop reading them.
Oh, the fairy tales, yeah, they're. I mean,
yeah.
I guess they're okay, and the
I love
ring
them,
was fun, but you know,
I did start skimming the footnotes because I was just like, these are just so long, and some of them are funny, and some of them are more like they're funny in that she's writing all of this down that doesn't matter, but it's not funny like, oh, that was a funny thing, like I laughed. Like the one where it's like, Mr. Drawlight or Mr. Childermass had a painting, and then nobody ever saw it again. And it's like, why did I turn back to this footnote for nothing? Like just to be told a painting doesn't exist anymore?
Well, I like the part where the painter, it's from a book written by a friend of the painter, and the whole story with Strange and Norrell keeps thinking that the painter is copying spells instead of doing a painting.
Yeah.
I thought that was hilarious. But just, you know, next section, just don't read the footnotes. Just don't.
Yeah. No,
You'll be a lot happier with the story. So
I
yeah.
was gonna say,
Unfortunately, I'm listening to it, so I don't have that option.
oh, does it go right
I
into
love
them?
them.
Oh yeah,
Huh?
yeah. It just flows right into them, and I mean, I'm driving while I listen. I'll sometimes miss a chapter title, and so I'm listening, and it'll be talking about Strange and Norrell. I'll space out, and when I tune back in, it's talking about a goose that swallowed a ring, and I'm going, wait, what?
Yeah. I was gonna say I really like that Strange and Norrell were like best buds, and now they're kind of like I don't feel like they're really antagonistic towards each other. They're more like friendly rivals. And I'm really hoping in part 3 they come back together again to banish the Thistledown hair man forever. That's
I
my
have
hope.
so much I wanna say right now.
You
So,
can't say it.
I
Don't
know I'm
say it.
not gonna say it. What I am gonna say is that all of the main narrative, any character that you spend any amount of time with, it's important. That character is an important character. So even though you
Hmm.
don't see Mr. Segundus as being particularly important, or Childermass, or Verniculus.
There's something going on with Childermass though, because he's been pulling Mr. Norrell strings from the beginning. I'm calling it.
Kind of.
There's something weird. He's either like he might be the Raven King or something, because he's been doing things the whole time. Although I really liked when Mr. Drawlight got caught and he's like, "Oh, you just walked through that window, did you? That mirror, did you? Yeah. This is let's do some magic for this girl right here. She's really wants some magic done. All of it.
That was such a great scene, and I love that the fact that she gets her reputation ruined by the other guy.
Les Ellis or
Yeah,
something.
something, yeah, Les Ellis, and that she's all mad, and she wants him to have leprosy and all these different diseases and be humiliated and run out of polite society, which I don't blame her for that. But I also just like how petty she is in general because she hates her father and she hates her ex-husband, and it's like, "You're the
And then
one
she
who
hates
acted
her
badly.
unaware. Yeah.
You want your cousin to just not get married because you screwed up?" It's just so I just love that scene.
Yeah. There was a lot of fun in this book that I did have.
Good.
It was definitely interesting. Speaking of having fun with the book, have either of you ever known, like, were friends with a guy, a Brit, I guess you'd say, a guy from England?
Mhm.
Uh,
No.
yeah, kind of, but not really.
Uh, back in my late teens, early 20s, I knew this guy. He was from outside of London, born and raised, and he would, off the top of his head, like, you know how in the U.S., at least back in the 80s, we used to tell Polish jokes.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, in England, they were Irish jokes. And he would always be telling Irish jokes. Like one I remember was what's written on the bottom of a bottle of Guinness, open other end.
Mm.
Just things like that. And so there's a line when the Thistledown Hairman transports Stephen. I'm going to read the paragraph. Stephen had never seen a landscape so calculated to reduce the onlooker to utter despair in an instant. "This is one of your kingdoms, I suppose, sir," he said. "My kingdom?" explained the gentleman in surprise. "Oh, no, this is Scotland." And every Irish joke he had ever said flashed through my head at that moment. I just cracked up laughing. It was just so, I don't know. It just captured his sense of British superiority so well.
But he's a fairy. It's kind of weird. But yeah, I know, I
Well,
agree.
because
I
that's
laughed.
where the
Well,
dogwood is.
yeah. Well, I don't know. Is the author English? Do you know?
I believe
Susanna
so.
Clarke.
I'm not sure. No,
Yeah, I have
I'm
no
not sure.
idea.
I'm just saying that the thistle-haired man is not English, which is
No,
what
and neither is Stephen technically.
no, he's
But
not.
that joke just seemed like something he would have said, you know.
So,
And it was funny.
what do you guys think about Arabella and how her character is handled?
She's been fine. I didn't really feel the same vibe that I guess Seeker got, where she's kind of like ignored by Strange. I thought they had a pretty decent kind of thing going on, and then it's just, like when she's kidnapped, it was magic, the fairy working that made Strange kind of forget it, or forget her, not forget her, but like not see her for a little bit. But I liked her, Bella. She was fun, and when she gets mad at Strange for being like, "Well, I'll just go through the ways again," and she's like, no," and he's like, "But you were fine when I went off to war." She's like, "No, I wasn't. Like, you went off to war. Please, like, pay some consider." Like, but that was just like that's a total husband thing to do, to not even think about it and be like, "Oh, she said she was fine, so she's fine," and it's clearly like she said she was fine, so you would go and do your duty, not because she was fine.
Well, I don't I disagree with Seeker too. I don't think that he ignores her. It's just that he's the absent-minded professor, and
Okay.
I think
He
she's
did write the love poem for her on the list of books he wanted from Norrell, right? So like,
Yep. And he writes her during the whole war and
It just
purposely
seemed to
doesn't.
me that every time, like, she sees he's unhappy, she tries to buy him books, she tries to do this to be noticed, to be an important part of his life, and he's so focused on magic that he seems to be completely ignoring her. And even when she, like, tries to tell him stuff about um the man with the thistle down hair, about the wife, or the
I
guy
get
comes
so
and says,
frustrated by that. So frustrated. She mentions him
He
like 3 times, and Strange isn't ever like, well, until near the end before they leave, and he's like, "Oh, there is no Thistledown man who lives here." And I was like, and then you just drop it and you never investigate
yeah,
again?
well,
Ah,
he
it
doesn't
is
even
it
he
is
calls him like the man with the big nose. He can't even remember the description she gave.
well, and it is he is very dense because he has already had the interaction with, King George. So he knows that King George is seeing somebody that he can't see, and
right,
that
but
King George
King
is
George even calls him the Thistledown hair man, which
Uh-huh.
no,
I
he calls him
guess
the silvery-haired man.
he
He calls
mentions
him, but
Thistledown
slightly
hair. I'm
right.
pretty sure,
No, he
but
doesn't, but
maybe not that. But
it
I
just
was like, just
that part
strange.
and then Norrell tells him about how fairies mad people, crazy people can see
Hmm.
fairies,
Right.
and
And Strange is
put
just oblivious.
he doesn't put it together, and I'm like, "Ugh." I got so frustrated with
Yeah.
that part.
But
So
Um,
you think he's just dense, not taking her for granted or ignoring her.
yeah, I just think he's not
uh-huh.
putting it together because he has all these other things going on in his head.
And I
And
think, well, I was gonna say, I think Arabella, I think he appreciates her when she does stuff, but he might not know about some of the things she's doing, like trying to buy those books for him.
that was
But
soul crushing.
well,
Mm.
that was more funny to me because I was like, of course, Mr. Norrell is like outbidding her, and because Mr. Norrell probably is doing it through a proxy and doesn't even know, right? So,
Mr.
Oh no,
Norrell was
Mr. Norrell
there.
was there.
oh, was
He
he?
was
I
there.
just
Yeah,
Yeah, he was.
he was personally outbidding her and knew exactly what he was doing and didn't care.
And everybody
see
was like, "Wow, he's kind of a jerk."
that's
Not
kind of his
letting
thing with books, though.
Yeah.
Again, so like, but
But
killing her on the last page of the volume was not cool. First off, in any sense, and especially since she died, I think she was one of my more liked characters
Well,
in this whole
Jonathan
story.
Strange thinks she died. She's been
Okay,
kidnapped and taken to ferry. So we
but
don't know if she'll show up again.
didn't they have her body or no?
No, they have they have the enchanted bogwood or peatwood.
That looks like her.
Right, which is
that's why
why it
there's
leaves.
water.
That's why there's the water on the floor.
I see. See, I just thought he used the bogwood to kill her, not to switch
No,
places with
no,
her.
he used the bogwood to make a dummy of her so that they would think she died and wouldn't come looking for her.
Well, I sure hope that they team up and then go beat the Thistledown Hair Man because that's my hope and joy for this.
Um, so what did you think about the magic in this section?
So much better. So much. It was so good. There were parts where I was like, why is he doing it that way? But that's just how Mr. Strange does it.
Mhm.
Oh, I love the descriptions of the roads. Should I make a chalk road? No, that's no good. Shall I make a dirt road? No, let's make us a Roman road. And the French always seem to outmarch them, regardless of how good their roads are.
And then there's that whole part where he's like, "Next time, make the road a bit wider." And then they have the scene where the sergeant or colonel or whatever comes up to Wellington and is like, "Um, yeah, the road disappeared." He's like, "I can't have my magician just, like, watching for you guys. Okay, keep up."
Yeah.
I thought it was so funny that all of Mr. Strange's creations, anytime he creates something, it lasts for way longer than he intends it. Like he creates the horses out of the salt or out of the silt in the bay that the ship gets stuck on. And then the horses are still around like 3 hours later. They're bothering people and his
Like a
birds that
day and
he,
a half.
yeah, it
Those
was
Yeah.
birds.
longer than
What
that
are
even.
you still doing here?
And the birds that he calls up are all like hanging around still. So I thought that was really funny and really funny. But the other thing I was like, is like they go to a town and the town's not there, and so like on the map, and so Mr. Strange just moves the town. Like he has no concern for geography at all. He's like, oh, I'll just move this town over 20 miles, like where it should be according to the map that we have. And,
He
and he's
moved
like,
Yeah.
he
he moves
moves
Brussels all the way to America and then back. And I'm like, what? You just why? And then
Or in a casual demonstration of magic, he swaps two churches
because they're
with
yeah,
all
'cause
the people inside.
and they just did it on, like, a drunken bet. Like,
Uh-huh.
yeah, so Mr. Strange is like he's got weird geography magic going because he's just like, oh yeah, I'll just move it here, move it there, and when they're fighting Napoleon, he's like, I'll make all the roads go east to west instead of north to south. And I'm like, can you do that? Like, how do you make a road? Like, where does it turn? Does it just turn on its center? Like, just whatever. And he's like, and I moved this over here, and I made this go over here, and he just flipped them, and saved the war according to the footnotes, which was funny. But like, he's just like, you have the weirdest magical taste ever. Like,
Well, it reminds me a lot of like fairy magic. Not
Mhm.
like Tolkien or anything, but actual
mhm,
old myths where you have someone wandering in the woods and they end up seeing the same tree 10 times, even though they're walking in a straight line.
yeah,
That's kind of like what it felt like they were going for, but from the caster's perspective rather than the person experiencing it.
yeah.
So, speaking of the birds, what, Leonard Strange? What are you doing here? You were supposed to have disappeared hours ago. He made Orzgic's sign to disperse a magic spell, and the bird flew off. In fact, rather to his consternation, a whole flock of birds took flight at the same moment. He glanced around nervously to see if anyone had noticed that he had bungled the magic, but everyone seemed busy with military concerns, and he concluded they had not.
Yeah, that was funny.
Yeah, that was for that whole scene with the Native Americans, and then some explorer 100 years later finds this tribe and they got English names and they're a little too light skinned, and it's like, what
The
the hell?
only thing they know how to do is hunt.
Yes,
No,
we get that the
all they
half
knew,
finished people.
yeah, the
Yeah.
half-made men, and they
No, all
speak
you had
like
to do was
5
kill,
different
yeah.
languages. Yeah.
There was a sentence I marked here that it was Mr. Norrell did not know a great deal about war, but he suspected that soldiers are not generally your great respecters of books. They might put their dirty fingers on them. They might tear them. They might, horror of horrors, read them and try the spells. Could soldiers read? Mr. Norrell did not know, but with the fate of the entire continent at stake, blah, 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 he refused. He had to refuse to lend them. He looked at Childermass with a desperate appeal. Childermass shrugged. He's just like, okay, well, sucks. You gotta give up your books.
Yeah.
And he's got to have multiple copies of the same book.
Oh yeah, because he's intentionally bought up everything so no one else can read one and try it and find out by accident that they're a magician.
Yeah, which is like, but you want more magicians. You just don't want there to also. Well, it's so weird because he wants
doesn't want
more, but I think he does because he really likes Strange. When he meets Strange, he's so excited. He just has an obsession about keeping books pristine and clean and safe.
I think he couldn't imagine the possibility of another magician having a different approach to magic, because I think what it is with Strange is he realizes he can learn from Strange.
Mhm.
But I don't think I think he imagines that anyone else would just learn and do things exactly his way and just be competition.
Well, here's what I think, because he really doesn't want more magicians, because he's always complaining about English magic is in such bad shape, blah, blah, blah. But every time someone else comes to him to learn, or when Mr. Secundus tries to open the school, he shuts it down. He really doesn't want anybody else. He he like you said, he's afraid somebody will be competition.
Well, I think he's more afraid that somebody will get good and then do bad stuff with it too, because that's always in his mind. What if somebody thinks we did something bad? What if we get associated with with fairies who do bad magic? That's kind of always present with him. So I wonder if it's not more, or just partially that he's paranoid about there being a bad magician.
Well, he wants to reconvene this court to prosecute Drawlight. It requires 12 magicians to have that court.
Yeah, and he's like, well, there's 2 over here, and I'm sure we could scrounge up a couple more if we have to.
Yeah, and I'll teach them all about magician law, and the PM's like, you cannot both be judge, jury, and instructor of law.
Yeah,
Right.
and he only came to that. He only came to that meeting with 42 pages of notes.
He's so OCD. I like how the L name guy,
Lascelles.
Lysalis,
Sure.
has actually become like the editor of the
The newspaper.
yeah, right. And he's like, he hasn't updated his decorations for 7 years because he's actually been working.
That was the funniest thing to me because it's always in English society. Well, not always, but like in a lot of English society books, people just live off their money that they get, right? Like, what's the famous one? The one I'm thinking of, Fred. We read the book about it, and I had the same kind of question. The Jane Austen one.
I was gonna say, it sounds like every Jane Austen.
Like Pride and Prejudice, where it's like, oh, I only get £1,000 a month. How will I ever survive? And it's like, well, you could get a job and work. And so, no, that's shut it. I die at the thought of work. This was
And
just
they're always
stories
talking about how this person is worth so much a year or so much a month, and it's like,
yeah,
okay,
It's always a
Yeah.
year.
it's
But
always a year, but
yeah, but then they always also make snide comments like, well, that person made their money in trade.
yeah, But
Yeah.
Lascelles actually was like actually working, and he's like, "This is more like." Yeah, that was so funny.
So, what do
Oh,
you guys think about zombie soldiers?
that was creepy. But you know, like
I
I
think it's
said,
interesting that thought he could blackmail Strange with them.
I think that was more Childermass or Lascelles because
It
Mr.
was
Norrell didn't even bring it up,
yeah, it was Lascelles and Drawlight that wanted to do that.
or Drawlight was out by that
Oh, no,
point.
yeah, he was out by that. You're right.
Uh, Here's a question though that Kipton wanted us to ask: would you like a house on an English moor?
Yes.
And I have to say that based on this book and the descriptions of everything English, I don't think there's anything I would like to be anything about English that I would like. Now that's not true because I like certain English things, but based on this book, nothing.
Well, maybe not the society.
No,
I hear
nothing.
about a Moor and I think of the Hound of the Baskervilles.
Fair enough. I
Either that or the scene of the Barrow Downs in the Lord of the Rings after they meet Tom Bombadil.
well, that's very much the vibe of this book too. Like, it has definitely is referencing that because the fairies all have barrows. Um,
Oh, what's so creepy? How the Thistle, the fairy, talks about how he's always criticizing the magicians' houses for being messy, and then his place is literally decaying, and he's got thousands of dead bodies outside his castle.
right.
And it's like, what the?
Yeah. That was a very cool scene when Jonathan Strange and the King are getting abducted, and Jonathan Strange is able to use the old fairy magic and stop it. That was a fun scene.
And the man with the thistledown hair is so angry, and he's complaining to Stephen about it. How could he even do that spell?
Yeah. That was funny. He's like, yeah, he does the taste one. And then in the footnotes, he's like, well, I guess the Thistledown man just didn't resort to using taste against him. It's like,
Right? Yeah.
it's like, how is your sense of taste going to pull you through this forest? Like, of course he didn't use taste.
So back to the zombies. This
Mhm.
is because she's really good at being funny, but she's also really good at being pretty dark. And there's this quote that says, in Madrid, the Spanish artist Francisco Goya made a sketch in red chalk of Jonathan Strange surrounded by the dead Neapolitans. In the picture, Strange is seated on the ground. His gaze is cast down and his arms hang limply on his side to his sides, and his whole attitude speaks of helplessness and despair. The expressions
Mhm.
of the supplicants on their face, one is putting out a tentative finger to stroke the back of his head. It is, needless to say, quite different from other portraits of Strange. So they have to end up burning these poor guys because he doesn't know how
He
to.
doesn't know how to terminate the spell.
Is he's so bad at ending his spells or setting a time limit on him? That's
Well, it says how to do it. It's like cut out their eyes and tongue. It's like Jesus.
And their heart.
Yeah.
It's just like this. It's creepy, but also there's a lot of pathos, and you feel bad for these poor soldiers who had already learned a language of hell and obviously don't want to go back, and just this helplessness because Strange doesn't know what he's dealing with.
All I can say is at least they didn't come back as Elantrians.
that's a deep cut for our Sanderson fans podcast.
This is during the Battle of Waterloo. Everything happened over and over, again and again. It was inconceivable that the fight would never end, and he began to think that it would always be like this. There must come a time when the musket balls and cannonballs run out, he thought. And what will we do with them? What will we do then? Hack at each other with sabers and bayonets, and if we all die, every one of us, who will say who has won?
Yeah.
And the image of him pulling the cavalrymen with mud hands down into the ground and killing them, it was brutal.
Mhm. No more brutal than the descriptions of the battle. I've read some very good dramatizations and descriptions of that battle, and it was less magical, but just as gruesome.
Oh, yeah.
I,
Horses charging into squares, horses getting shot just as they're about to turn aside and falling onto the square, which ends up breaking the square, and then the British having to shoot their own people rather than risk the fleeing soldiers breaking another square. It's just, yeah,
I
that battle
yeah.
was. Ugh.
Susanna Clarke can definitely have a way with words read, like with what you just read and with some other things. But there's so much other stuff that she spends as much detail on, but not as much wordsmithing on, that it just gets lost to me. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Like the scene you're describing is well written. It's nice and compact, and it's beautiful and it's disturbingness, right? But then she goes into a level of detail that's similar about what some guy's wearing that doesn't matter, and it's like I get bogged down so much by the what the guy's wearing that those other moments can't hit me as hard because I'm too bogged down by it. Does
You're
that
too irritated by what's going on with the other stuff, and
right?
you feel
Or
like
I'm
it's a
just like
distraction.
I'm overtired because I've had to like process like because I'm like, okay, what is he trying to actually say here? Okay, it doesn't matter. I just wasted 5 minutes thinking about it, and now I have to, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
I just wish, like I keep saying, that it just been like trimmed a little bit, even just streamlined a little bit more, because then I think those moments would hit even harder if it was, you know what I mean? There's
Mhm.
that. I keep
My
saying that.
question is this her style or is this intentional style for this book?
Uh,
It's intentional style for this book.
I think it's intentional and 100% her style because Piranesi is very kind of similar.
I disagree. I think Piranesi is very different in its style.
Eh,
I was actually shocked because I did not like Piranesi. In fact, I think I DM'd you a couple very angry
you might
comments.
have. I don't remember. It was. I
It's like,
think. I think her level of detailness is the style part where she goes into detail about everything in kind of odd ways. But
but that is a really, I mean, that's a novella. It's not very long.
no, but it's still there's still a lot of over explanation of everything. I thought.
So I just going back to Norrell real quick. I find it really interesting that we find out why he is so angry and hates the Raven King so much.
Yeah.
Yes, that was definitely an interesting reveal.
He's just like, he abandoned us. He doesn't care about us, and I want to excise him
Yeah.
from our magic. And I thought that that was a really good and interesting development in his character.
Yeah, it was a big shock to see like, oh, you were like Mr. Strange was. You wanted to do the magic all the time and see the Raven King, and now you're like you've been scorned, and you're like, oh, he doesn't care. He wouldn't come. No, I was a fool. I have to change. I have to do it this way. But this that just leads me to really hope for the third one that they defeat the Thistledown Hair Man, who may or may not be the Raven King.
He's definitely not.
He might be. You never know.
No, because the Raven King was not a fairy. He was a
We
human.
that's what 400, 500 at least years ago. There's a lot of things that could have been lied about.
L Look, I
I'm
don't
just
think this is a spoiler. He's not
I'm,
the Raven King.
I'm giving
He's
you a
not.
look like I know it's not, but I was just having fun playing it up. I'm
Okay.
like I said, I really think that Childermass is maybe the Raven King, and he's been there all along. But uh, no, I'm excited for like the team up and the fight eventually, hopefully.
Okay. So, predictions, besides stupid stuff like the thistle-haired down man is the Raven King.
I've
Not that.
given my prediction. Jonathan Strange will reach out to Mr. Norrell because he thinks his wife has died, or he figures out that it's a fairy trick, and then they go and they stop the Thistledown Man. Meanwhile, that'll happen at like the end 3 chapters of the book, and everything else before then will be like, we have to journey to this land, and Mr. Black will get more presents that make him more kingly. And Mrs. Poe will just continue to try and tell people and talk about the weirdest things she's ever thought of.
You know that that's a spell, right?
No, I know that. That's what I mean. Like, she'll just continue to do that. It'll keep happening because she can't break the spell.
And I mean, Steven does it too when people ask him.
Yeah. No, I know. I'm just saying, like,
I feel
I
so
just,
sorry. I'm sorry.
no, I was just saying, like, I think they won't be able to break out themselves, but maybe they would. So, like, they'll just keep trying to tell people and not working. That's what I meant. That's all.
I feel so sorry for the grocer lady who's in love with him. She's like, "I'll go to Africa with you." It was just I feel so bad for her. Okay, Seeker, do you have any predictions?
I've got lots of speculation that I want to know about, but I'm way too confused to come up with an actual prediction. I was just looking over the prophecy to see if I could spot anything that might give me a clue, but it's also cryptic poetic. I am completely useless.
When you read the prophecy again after you finish the book, you'll be like, "Oh, that makes sense." So, just
Yeah. I
just
mean
saying.
that is the experience I had with A Wheel of Time. You know, once I've read it 2 or 3 times, then all of the prophecies make sense as I read them.
Mhm. Yeah.
I've only read that once.
Should definitely do it again.
That's what everyone keeps saying, but you know what? Green Team took over my reading schedule.
Well, sounds like we need to read The Wheel of Time on Green Team.
Oh, jeez, no. I didn't like it that much. It was fine. It was
the,
fine.
the thing about The Wheel of Time is it set the stage. Without The Wheel of Time, we would not have Sanderson. You know, so it's kind of like what a lot of people say about Dune. They're like, why do you say it's so great? It's nothing compared to whatever. And it's like, well, yes, but all of those are based off of this.
Well,
And
yes, but no.
I don't think you can argue that as much for Dune as you can for Wheel of Time.
I think Dune was for political sci-fi.
I don't know. Heinlein.
Yeah, well, Heinlein, Clarke, Herbert, Asimov, they're all like the same era.
Right.
And we can debate how political each of them are, but
They're
um,
all pretty political.
yes, a lot of social commentary in all of them.
And some of it's dumb social commentary.
I
But I'll
thoroughly
cut that.
enjoy Asimov's. He
I
his sense of whimsy and humor, I just love.
I'm trying to think of the 3 which I like better. I honestly like Heinlein better, but I don't think I necessarily agree with him. I just enjoy
Well, Heinlein
there
was all
there
caught up in the weird marriages and child rearing and stuff
well, I mean, but
that
there's a
were
lot of that
of the era.
stuff there was a lot of that in Dune too, especially as you get further into the series. What is it with all of those people and weird sex stuff? 'Cause
I
Well,
think I think that was the
Stephen
era.
King
it
too.
was just the era, but luckily, Susanna Clarke has none of that weird stuff in it at all.
No weird sex
Well,
stuff.
it's what, Victorian England?
It's
Exactly. There's none of it.
no,
Well, it's King George, but
it's
just
King
after
George the 3rd.
Victoria?
No, King George the 3rd was king when during the Revolution.
Okay.
It's 1810 is when the book
Yeah,
takes.
it's
When
Napoleonic.
right, but when was Victoria queen?
She was in the I wanna say
I don't know.
1850?
Oh, okay, so it's even before her. So yeah, it
Yes,
makes sense.
Yeah.
yes.
Even more prudish.
I don't know about that. I
Oh,
mean, when the
I'm aware that these things come in waves and pendulums, and you can't just say further back in time, more socially conservative. It doesn't work that way.
I was gonna say because Henry VIII's court was notorious
Oh yes,
for
yes, absolutely.
so any closing thoughts?
I'll let somebody else go first because I feel like I've gone first on a lot of thoughts.
My thoughts are I can't wait for you guys to see how everything wraps up because it is all tied up with in a beautiful bow at the end of the book.
Very nice to know. And yeah, that's my biggest thing is I hope that all these loose ends get tied up because right now it's just a big mess.
There's
Like,
only one loose end, but it's not a loose end that you would expect.
yeah. My thoughts are the same as I've said most of the time. It's just too much of tedious stuff. But I really did enjoy the second volume more than the first. And I do anticipate really liking the third volume. So I hope that holds true.
Yeah, I also enjoyed the second more, especially the Peninsular Wars.
Mm-hmm.
I predict that you will not like the third volume as much, Chesky.
Oh, okay.
I don't know about Seeker.
Well, I don't know why, but I have thoroughly enjoyed the book. There's just some books I start listening to them and I don't want to put them down, and this has been one of those. And I don't understand why I like some and why I don't like others.
Well, that's fair. I mean, I don't
Sometimes.
like there's a lot of Robin Hobb fans
Hmm.
on our Discord. I don't like her. I just
Hey,
don't.
you just keep those wrong opinions to yourself over there.
Oh, you and Eric can just get on me if you want.
Yeah.
To
I think Robin Hobb I would have done better if the titles had been different, but I went in with expectations of assassins, and instead I got what it is,
Yeah.
which is
has nothing
almost
to
a
do with
coming
us.
of age story, and that's the whole assassin thing is just tangential,
I
you
read it
know.
when I was young enough that didn't matter for me. So,
Mm.
but
Yeah, but another example, there's this fantasy series that a friend recommended to me. I think it's called the Portal Fantasy or something. The story sounds absolutely fascinating. I can't get through like the first 4 or 5 hours. I listen for half an hour and I find myself just not paying any attention at all, even though the story seems interesting. So,
Yeah. I mean, it's just there's so much taste
mhm.
yeah,
involved. And like we talked about on the first episode where we were covering this, I love Charles Dickens. Chesky does not.
yeah, that's true.
So there you go. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. You can join the conversation on Reddit and Discord. We are also on Twitter at Green Team Pod. Please consider supporting the Legendarium via Patreon. The music is Galactic Damages by Jingle Punks. Thanks, Craig, for loaning us a little corner of your media empire. And for Chesky and Seeker, I'm Little Red Book. Good night, y'all.
Good night.
Bye.
And I'm not going to have to cut 5 minutes of cursing because there was only one person who cursed, and it was me.